Ham Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos.
Today we're going to talk about one of our favorite collaborations of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips.
Yeps, they do quite a bit of work together, and of course we have to jump into every title that they write and draw.
Yep. So tonight we're going to be looking over Kill or Be Killed by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips.
Yes, and so we are talking about, of course, the Deluxe edition, which is the hardcover collected edition of the 20 issues. Now, originally the story, when did it start? It first came out?
This started in August 3rd of 2016.
That's very precise. August 3rd. That
Facts.
was the debut. Facts. We are sticking to facts tonight. That's what this is about, is facts. Part of this too is when we look at what is collected and what's not, Deluxe edition, and we always want to remind everyone, Deluxe edition is very different than an omnibus or absolute. They're all hardcovers. They all collect a series. But when you have, I don't want to say indie, but when you have like Image Comics or what else am I
Dark
thinking?
Horse.
Dark Horse. They kind of have like special formats. Absolute editions, which are, again, oversized, bigger, like more towards the original artwork size. Those are kind of exclusive to DC Comics a little bit.
Yes.
So when you get into a Image comic run, they do a lot of deluxe editions, and it really works well.
Yes, that and because I would say Dark Horse does more library editions.
Yeah, which again are a little oversized.
Yeah, I would say they kind of they're similar, but little differences here there.
So the coolest thing about Kill or Be Killed is that it is collected, and that's really what people are looking at when you want to read an Ed Brubaker run.
Yep.
He writes the long game. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, I would say so.
It's a slow burn. Like, he knows probably what the 20th issue is going to be when he first starts.
Right, but it's how you get there.
Yeah, you might not know what's in between.
Yep, the journey.
So Ed Brubaker, he writes like crime noir.
Yes.
Real gritty, like real stories, real ground level stories.
Yep.
I don't think you'll find him writing a cosmic story. Like
no, magic
Planet.
is far from it.
Yeah.
Cosmic, the unreal, the unimaginable. He's very
It's not his thing.
In the streets.
Yeah.
In the streets.
And he always, when you look up him as a writer, it does say that his family, like his dad, it was in the CIA. So he's always grown up with sort of that mentality of facts, right?
Yeah.
Facts.
Mhm.
Lay it all out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it brings us to Kill or Be Killed. What did you think of this, Andrew? We're talking about it. We're going to chat about
this was outside of Daredevil. I will say this was my first true crime story I've ever read. And I will say that was very compelling. There was at points of around the 5th issue, 6th issue that I had to put the book down and stare into something else because I was like,
overwhelmed you.
Okay, this is a little drastic. But then once I got over that a little bit, the little crisis of thinking, I delved back into it, and I just had to finish it. And I quickly binged it, and I loved it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, they have such a style where it is like real life. You
Yes.
start reading it and it's almost like you are reading a illustrated version of like Silence of the Lambs or a Quentin Tarantino movie or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I definitely got those vibes.
Like you fall into it and you're like, this is really happening somewhere, and then something pops up that sort of shocks you into, oh, this is fiction. But his writing flows as if it's a real conversation. Like, you hardly ever fall out of the conversation. Do you know what I mean?
It's like a very plain everyday conversation. You can, when I was reading some of these stories, it was like I could see it on the news happening, or if I'm talking to somebody and I overhear it on the social media or something like that. It's not something that I couldn't imagine, but it was very gripping and dark, I will say.
Yeah, and like at the same time, when you're reading like a Marvel Comics story and you're reading the X-Men or something,
Yep.
and you fall into that storyline and they start explaining like characters' history or
The origin story.
yeah,
This is
or
how
like
I fell in a bath of chemicals.
yeah, how did this become a mutation? And it talks about all this,
Right.
cosmic energy and mutation, and you're not going to get any of that in a Brubaker story. You're going to pretty much be straightforward and true to life and extra layers of grit, which is why I really liked Kill or Be Killed, because it has a supernatural element to it.
Yes.
Kind of like surprises you.
Yes. And I did like that Ed Brubaker was more of taking a chance with vigilantism, if that's how you want to call it. It's a different, more modern take on this average superhero story and superhero origin. It's making more realistic choices and decision making, and while still having that little aspect of superhero where there is one element that drives the character forward, I guess.
Yeah. And fun fact, Ed Brubaker was one of the co-creators of The Winter Soldier.
Oh,
Bringing back the Winter Soldier into the Captain America run. And fun fact, in the Winter Soldier movie, he's in the room with the Winter Soldier. So it is kind of,
yep.
it must have been
When I was
crazy.
doing a little fun fact searching here, I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah.
To be like, that's my creation and I'm in the movie. And
Which is pretty cool to
yeah, that was probably a great day. But for this story, it starts out, I mean, pretty straightforward. You kind of get immediately thrown into this guy's life. I don't want to jump around, but it seems poignant that we are going to jump around because the story jumps around and it kind of like breaks the fourth wall a little bit, surprises you and says, I'm the narrator and, my name's Dylan and this is my story. And then the book starts out in a scene and you're like, he's running, he's shooting, he's gunning people down, he's fighting. And then he's like, oh, you don't know how I got here. Let's go back a bit.
Oh yeah, I remember this now.
And then it goes back to like, and they're like, oh, this is cool. Like,
yeah.
And then it flashed back like a year ago or something.
Yeah, he's like,
right?
oh, that's how each issue starts off with is, oh, what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. We have to go back.
Yeah, he's got like a shotgun and he's like, oh, you don't even know how I got this one.
Yeah, and then he catches himself doing it. And it's kind of like a running joke almost, but it's meant to illustrate what Dylan's going through.
Yeah, well, then you get the idea that it's an omniscient narrator. So you're not really following through the story chronologically. You're sort of following through the story of Dylan's manic mind.
This is the main character.
Yes, Dylan is the main character. Sorry about that. And you kind of fall into like the way that he is thinking about things or the way that, things upset him. So then that's all of a sudden the scene is that he's talking about his frustration. And then he's like, oh, you don't know why I'm frustrated and I'll show you. And then it goes back to that part. So I thought that was a really cool way to write the story because you were not given like, here is today and the next issue is tomorrow and the next issue is the next day. You had to like piece this together.
Yep.
And I told Andrew when I was done reading it, I said, you know what? I would have hated to read that in single issues, which came out once a month.
Yeah.
Not because it would be like difficult to follow, but because it would be really hard to wait till the next month because every single issue ended with a what the heck was that?
Yeah, an epic cliffhanger, which is good. That's what good writing's supposed to do and keep the reader going. But it's also, if you're waiting months between issues, it's you have to keep the reader's interest, keep their attention span. You have to keep them motivated. And to do that that long is a little hard.
I guess I should say in a perfect world, the issues will come out once a month.
Yes. Yep.
a lot of times there are delays for one reason or another, or
Yep.
a lot of times writers and artists are working on multiple projects,
Yep.
and some of them either pay better or move along faster
Right.
at the printing press. Um,
I guess real quick, this Kill or Be Killed is their own creation, and they're by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. They did this through Image Comics. Image Comics gives the creators their control over their own material.
Yeah, that we always like giving a little history bite here and there, but Image Comics, of course, is famously made by ex creators and artists that were super popular at their time at Marvel Comics, and they broke away and formed Image Comics. Let me see if I can do this off the top of my head. Todd McFarlane,
Yep.
Jim Lee,
Yep.
Mark Silvestri,
Yep.
Liefeld,
Rob Liefeld.
Rob Liefeld, and Carlos Pen. No, gosh. Okay, that was pretty good. That was pretty good off the top of my head.
McFarlane, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Mark Silvestri, and Rob Liefeld.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much on the
I
spot.
did it. Yeah. Well, I will age myself, but I was there, and they left because Marvel wasn't treating them very well, and it was very well known. I mean, they told everyone in the world, like, hey, we took Marvel Comics, some of their top lines, X-Men, Spider-Man, and Captain America, and they took their top lines, top characters, started drawing and writing those issues, and all of a sudden they started doing amazing, like super great, sell, top selling comic. I mean, a lot of comic fans will remember when Jim Lee did X-Men #1. I mean, it was crazy.
Changed the world.
Yep.
Changed comics, man.
Lines down the block. No joke.
Yep.
And so they told Marvel, we're leaving. You're not going to, treat us right. You're not going to let us make our own creation. Because I guess I love all our rabbit trails today. Someday we'll come back and talk about Kill or Be Killed. But if you're at Marvel Comics or DC Comics and you come up with a character, whatever it is, if they say, hey, I want you to make a character that can make earthquakes, and you're like, cool. And you make that character, and then now all of a sudden that's a pretty popular character. You as the artist are working for Marvel, and everything you create
is owned by
theirs.
Marvel.
It's owned by them.
It's not owned by you.
Yeah. So if you left, Marvel still has that character forever. And then they don't have to pay you anything on that character because, you made it for them. So the guys left Marvel, started Image Comics, and they said, everyone that comes to Image, including us, we will come up with our own characters and we will own everything for that character.
Yep.
So, of course, Todd McFarlane made Spawn, and then Wildcats, and then Eric Larson made Savage Dragon.
Yep.
And
there's a couple other ones, but yeah.
And probably the most recent is what's his face with Walking Dead?
Oh, Robert Kirkman.
He came up with Walking Dead.
Yep, he's part of Image, yeah.
He's part of Image, and of course he owns the rights for all of the Walking Dead, and look how far that went.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're back to Kill or Be Killed.
But I thought that was good to mention, because when you have, it depends who owns it, creates it, and it really takes a good talent to own it up to what these guys are doing, what him and Sean Phillips are doing. So I think that's a great point to bring up. Yeah,
and so I'm going to leap back to the beginning of the book. All right. Oh, here we go. I joked that there is not a single page in this book that you can't open and have swear words on it, or open and have blood or nudity or something.
Yep.
So it's a pretty tough book as far as like, if you think this is not for mature audiences, it is. But great story, great art, great, really good story.
Real quick, how would you describe Sean Phillips's art style?
So when I first saw Sean Phillips and recognized the style straight out was when I read Winter Soldier and Captain America. That was the first, I guess, my first introduction to even Ed Brubaker which a lot of people say that was a great introduction because I mean his writing on Captain America is still considered one of the best runs. But you can tell right away the colors, the style, the like amount of black that's on the page. Um, he's one of my favorite artists because hands down, he has number one a great idea of how the page should flow.
Yes.
And then also a great idea of like how much detail actually needs to be put into each character. Sometimes if someone's just sort of like running away, he's just like do 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 do, he's running away. You know, like you don't need to over detail every single aspect of every part of the page. And then some things are just like she's wearing a black sweater and it's just solid black, head to toe black.
Hmm.
So you're like, okay, cool. I mean, I'll fill in the gaps,
Right.
right?
I think, yeah, the colors that Elizabeth Brettweiser did with Sean Phillips, they definitely complement the mood. They definitely set the tone, and I think that alone, that artistry kind of it really sets the book up for being a great story and just flowing through. I like his paneling that they did. That was really cool because they kind of break away from the structure of the, 6 panel, 4 panel. Sometimes they do this like split panel where it's just white on one side and
Yeah.
on the picture on the other side. And when I was watching a Sean Phillips interview, just from 2018, he was like, sometimes what the character is saying is different than what the, um, what's the word? Not the director, the narrator,
Yeah.
what the narrator is saying. So it really relies and gives meaning to the unreliable narrator or the unreliable storyteller, and kind of plays with that.
Yeah, I mean, I always want to talk about artwork. It's like my thing.
Hmm.
And it, there's parts where, okay, so you'll hear a lot of people saying when you read a comic book that you should not only, people ask, okay, so I'm flowing through the page. I'm just jumping from one text bubble to the next, text bubble, text, 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 and then you flip the page, right?
Hmm.
There's another way to, you have to back up a little bit and take the whole page in, right?
Hmm.
Because a lot of the artists will work on the whole page.
And I
And
could
there,
see that with this
yeah, and there
particular.
won't be any text. When an artist is actually drawing that page, there are no text bubbles. So you have to kind of back up a little bit and just say, this looks like he's trying to get this mood across, or he's trying to get us to move our eye in this direction. And sometimes there's a little misdirection. You know, all the characters are looking to the left of the page, and then all of a sudden something happens on the right side of the page,
Yeah.
which is fun in an artistic way, and it's fun in a storytelling way because the other part of it is so number one, look at the whole page, back up from the text and look at the whole page. Number two, try to fill in what is happening from one panel to the next, because in one panel a character's sitting down, in the next panel they're standing, and the next panel they're running down the street. So it's like it's up to you as the reader to kind of keep this playing in your head.
Right. I think people might do that unconsciously, but to deliberately think about that is
Mhm.
is a challenge almost.
Yeah, and it adds a lot. I mean, it adds a whole new story.
Yeah.
Um, the other cool thing, of course, when you get back to colors and everything, is that if you just flip through 600 pages of this book, and all the colors are like the same tone and sort of the
Yes.
same feel, and like there isn't one that's jumping out, or you don't have a like a sunny day. I mean, it's like
No, no.
it's
This is like in the winter. If you go outside in the winter and it's like midday,
it's overcast all the
overcast
time.
all the time, it is not a bright and sunny day here, folks. If you're here for that story, you probably shouldn't read it. But.
Yeah, this is not that story. So Dylan starts working through the story, and you know what? You can tell. I mean, we try not to do spoilers, so we're going to try not to totally spoil the whole thing. But you can tell from the cover. The first cover of Kill or Be Killed is there's a guy in a hoodie with a red mask, like a red ski mask, and a shotgun.
Yes.
So you're like, okay, something's happening here, and you quickly find out that that's Dylan. I mean,
Yep.
that's, I'm not really giving anything away. So somehow the book starts out with Dylan in a hoodie with a red ski mask, shooting people. And
Just another day.
yeah. And then he jumps away from that and he's like, oh, you don't know why I'm doing this. Let me tell you. So then you start getting a little glimpse into his life. And of course, you notice his life is not very exciting and that he's either clinically depressed or clinically insane or bored or easily manipulated or
Yeah.
so you kind of, all of those emotions go through as you're reading and you're trying to figure out, I mean, honestly, you're trying to figure out why the heck is he doing this, right?
Yes.
Like, that's the idea.
How did he get to the point where he just starts killing people?
Yeah. And then, of course, he explains it as he's a vigilante and that he's only shooting bad people.
Yeah.
Which, I think that could be another whole episode that we talk about of just what exactly is a vigilante. And, if you, in the comics, and, let's not bring in too much real life, I guess, but
Yeah.
in the comics, if you're a vigilante, I think they call it an anti-hero.
Yes.
So people think, well, you're doing good. You're trying to live by
A moral
a
code.
code of some sort.
Yeah.
And so he's saying, I won't shoot a cop or things like that. And so you start piecing together his story.
Right. We get to learn more about Dylan's justice. I think that's what, at the core of this book, is what's everybody has a different version of justice and vigilantism, and kind of they explore what that means and kind of has a lot of back and forth. It evolves, it gets dismantled, it really is, it gets explored.
Yeah, and I thought there's a couple of cool scenes in here where like he is taking his justice out, and then all of a sudden New York City, which he's in, is like, we're gonna catch this vigilante, and they spend quite a bit of time with like the cops and like the motorcycle police and the SWAT teams, and
Yeah,
they
just different versions of it.
start like bumping up security and they start like really finding whoever's doing this. And it is kind of refreshing to see that as a real world response, because some comics are missing that,
Yes.
I mean, obviously buildings are exploding and stuff and you don't see a cop anywhere and you're like, oh, okay. In this one, it's like, no, they're in the subway and they're
And I would say
actively
that
pursuing.
every action, there's consequences. And when we were talking about real life and how that applies to this book, he brings that up and really applies that really well to this. Like, if he shoots somebody from the Russian mob, they're just going to keep on coming after him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They, you realize there's hundreds. So the other part of this, which I don't think is much of a spoiler, is that you find out why Dylan started this in the first place.
So Dylan wasn't on a good path for himself. He was having some breakdowns and he decided to end his life. Essentially, that's what happens. And so he falls off this building and he wakes up again. Normally people don't do that. So he's like, oh, how did this happen? Maybe I'm just getting another chance. Maybe it's from another power. It is from another power. He wakes up in the bathroom and he finds this demon.
Yeah, a demon actually saying, you like cheated me out of having your soul, I suppose, right?
Yep.
And so it just says, you owe me one and you're going to start doing what I want you to do.
Yeah. Or else.
You really will be mine, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, he's trying to figure out, is there now a renewed purpose in his life? Is this what a second chance means? And, now that he has been saved from death, is his second chance then to wreak havoc on evildoers or suicide. Yeah.
Society, yeah.
But, he is not, he's just a regular guy.
Mhm.
He's,
It definitely takes a lot of forces for him to push himself to kill somebody,
yeah.
and then to keep doing it, because it's the deal he made with this demon was that it's a once a month deal.
Oh, that's yeah, one person a month. And then he says, "Well, how the heck do I know who that is?" And he says, "Oh, you'll know." So then I feel like he kind of gets a little bit like a sixth sense sort of like kind of
Yeah,
picks up on
he's looking towards the news more, towards what's going on around him. People that he might think that just have been treated poorly because of X person, he'll go after those sorts of people.
yeah, and this I think is Ed Brubaker's way of giving that sort of tongue in
Voice.
cheek
Yeah.
almost, yeah, or like a voice to just society in general. And what he's saying is, I mean, if you really broke it down, number one, um, there are depressed and troubled and quiet people everywhere, right?
Yes.
So, are they looking for companionship or camaraderie, or are they looking to, do bad things, right? So Ed Brubaker is saying, if you go through life just living your life and you're just you and you're not, you're either not noticed or you don't bother anyone, you can do that. But if you really start looking for, like Andrew was saying, like, you start looking in the news and you start reading and you start observing and you start feeling sort of that like dirt of society and you start feeling like that sort of, inherent sort of evil,
Yeah.
then you start believing that it's everywhere. And, I think that's sort of not to get too ethereal here, but that's what a lot of people say. You could very easily fall into nothing but bad news
Yeah.
and just absorb it and have it be part of your life, or you can choose to change your life. Now, Dylan in the story, he didn't choose to change his life until like later on.
Yeah.
In a way,
It definitely took a lot of push and a lot of when a lot of his supporting cast are attacked and are threatened.
yeah.
That is the only time when he will go through this life-changing
Yeah.
process of
He starts realizing that there's a reason for him to be here. And however small it is, he starts looking at sort of the smaller things in life that make him happy, right?
right.
Um,
Like there is hope in this story, in this character.
yeah. And then, there's things that he likes, there's things that he cares about. So it's not like he,
He has some dark humor moments.
yeah. Yeah. And, we
There's,
don't
like,
want him to sound like he is a villain. And that's just, I mean, you go back and forth in the story. You're like, is he good? No, he's not a good guy. Well, is he bad? Well, yeah. And you just don't know.
Exactly. It definitely kind of makes you question, like, if this were to happen outside my home and my community, what would I think about that? And it definitely kind of rolls it back a little bit and makes you question it a little bit. And I like that.
Now, the other part too is as you kind of go through the story, again, if this is in collected edition, it's all there. And, I don't know if you could possibly sit down and read this in, one session or two sessions or three sessions, because I mean, the material is heavy. The material is not, um, I guess the way that I would say it is usually in comics or novels or movies, like, they establish who the hero is, something happens that, you didn't make your goal,
Yep.
and then you rise above, and the end of the story is success. And in comics, it's nice to have that happen maybe every once in like 3 or 4 issues or something like that, because a comic book issue is about 25 pages. So you want to have it, you don't want to read 100 pages where you're like, nobody won anything.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like I'm 100 pages in and everyone is still as downtrodden as when they started,
Yeah, I definitely like the transformation of Dylan throughout this whole book. He evolves as a character and has some great story arcs. And you know what? He fails a lot, and even though he thinks he wins, he's always feeling optimistic. And then he goes, "Oh, I screwed up, screwed up. Oh, gotta backtrack. Oh, gotta go hide for a while. Okay, then maybe I'll try again." You know,
Yeah.
definitely relatable, I would say.
And I want to talk a little bit about how the story moves you through, because it actually introduces quite a few characters. And in my comic book reading life, it's always amazed me how artists can actually draw someone where you would recognize them um, issues from now. Like if you saw in one comic someone was drawn with like long brunette hair and high eyebrows and a big nose or something like that,
Mhm.
and then like 5 issues later that person pops up again, it's a testament to the artist that you would recognize that person.
Yes, I agree.
And especially when you're drawing normal looking people in clothes and
Yeah.
suits.
Mhm.
When you're drawing comic book characters, their costume is their costume, and of course you're like, oh my gosh, that's Quicksilver, or
Right. You can
whatever.
have a few liberties here and there, but to carry this out for the whole 20 issues and have distinct looking characters the whole
Yeah,
time.
and I mean that's just a great thing to um, set up as a storyteller, because it doesn't matter how these people are changing their outfits or what time of day, or this actually spans quite like a year, maybe
Yeah, I would say
two
so.
2 years, maybe the story
Mhm.
spans. And you know even one of the main characters, she changes her hair color, so
Yeah, his girlfriend. Yeah, his first
yeah,
girlfriend. Yeah.
so you're like, oh wow, that's a totally
She's
different
probably my
person.
favorite supporting character, I would say
Yeah, she did great.
that.
And that's the other thing too, is that Ed Brubaker writes everyone where you really do have a favorite character, like you fall into their storyline, even if it's just totally out there, or if they're, you know, I don't know, jaded or have problems themselves. You still start relating to them on a
Yeah, and
pretty
you want
pretty
to
basic
know,
manner.
yeah, like what's her story? What's going on with her? There's way more to her than what's going on. Well, that's what's being said.
Yeah, and like if something happened to Dylan while you're reading it, you really were like, "Oh, come on." Like you want to root for the the main character. You want to root for him. It is like his story, and you want it to come out. And then of course, Ed Brubaker always throws in these little like side stories and says, "Well, now he found this," or "Hey, this came up from his past."
Right. Or
And
she, had just as rough upbringing as he did.
yeah, and then it's almost like just when you think this main character is really bad, like, "Hey, there's no hope for this
Mhm.
guy," then they throw a little nugget in there and they
Right.
say, "Well, how do you think of him now?" Like
Exactly.
here.
And I think he did a really good job of making these supporting characters and they're really important like later on, and they're intervaling like throughout the story, and they definitely come back around towards the end and help him, and I really like that part of it
Yeah,
as well.
and they do change scenery quite a bit. You do learn a little bit more about that demon that's following around, and the nice thing is that Dylan is the narrator. So
Yep.
Dylan is very plainly talking to you as if you were just sitting across the table
Yeah,
talking.
just like another friend,
Yeah,
going hanging
a
out.
chat. We're having a chat.
Yeah.
And Dylan's having a chat with you. And then he says, "Oh, here's my life." And then he kind of lays out a few more things, and then he mixes it all up again. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is just another, you know, great story. We're trying to find stories that really strike us in a certain way, or, you know, jump out from our collection, because as we've said in past episodes, um, Andrew and I are collectors ourselves. So we're always reading and always exploring, and we are members of a few groups where the people are suggesting, hey, you guys should read this. If you liked Winter Soldier, you should start reading this. Or now that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips have quite a few titles.
Yes. So this was their sixth collaboration that they did.
Number
So
6.
yeah, and I think that's pretty unusual for a team of writer and a artist to stick around for that long. And
Well,
they're
in
still
today's
continuing.
in today's day, sure.
Because I don't think that's something that hasn't happened since like the 70s, 80s.
Yeah,
I would
and
say.
and enough that people they're really getting that sort of duo name.
Yep.
You
And
know,
they have a name for each other.
Yeah.
That people are like, oh, this is a Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips book. Okay, I'll just pick it up, go in my cart.
I'll get it. It'll be good. It'll be good.
Yep, it'll be good. No worries. So that's pretty cool.
What
I
was
guess
there?
for being the Brubaker fan that you are, Ramos, what story that these two did would you like to see on the big screen or the small screen?
Oh boy.
Putting you on the spot.
All right. I have read quite a few of theirs. Some of their more popular ones is Criminal, which again has deluxe editions. Unfortunately, here's the problem. If you're going to say, well, you know what? I'm going to take Chris's advice and I'm going to start collecting all these. They're hard to find because the hardcovers are. They're out of print. They have a limited run. I think I even saw someone asking when they're going to do a new run of the Fade Out, I think, and they said, well, it's kind of costly too. The original run of this, the first comic in 2016, only had what, 33,000?
Yeah, so this one, and that was good for them because, as we said earlier, they don't get paid till the story gets released.
Yeah.
So they're like, we need this to happen. Yeah, so their first issue had an initial print run of 30,000 issues.
Wow.
In 2016, and it quickly sold out at the distribute level, and a second printing was announced 6 days later. So they're like, oh yeah, we got to keep going. Then their next 2 issues did like 24,000 a piece, which was good. And then it kept, they kept going, but not as drastic numbers, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, those aren't like really, really huge numbers.
But for
those,
an indie book,
yeah,
that nobody's heard
single
of,
issue,
right? That's their name and their collaboration that they hold now.
Well, I guess if you were like an artist painting or crafting furniture or something like that, I mean, technically you don't get paid till it sells, I guess.
Yeah,
that's one way to think about it. But yeah, so they've written Criminal, they've written Fatale, which is a great story. That again has 2 deluxe editions, which are long out of print and kind of hard to find. But Fatale is a great, great story. That one is a little more like you haven't read Fatale, no?
I haven't. This is my first one.
Oh, that one's a little more like supernatural, even more. So I think Ed Brubaker, while he doesn't write stuff that's totally like phantasmical or totally out of the box, he'll write something that has like an odd
like an odd twist
phenomenon
that happens in a real world.
An odd little poltergeist twist or some sort of like weird old magic kind of idea, which is cool because it adds to that crime noir feel. And I think he'd be great at writing like X-Files and stuff. He has written HBO's Westworld. That's his other thing too that he's been
that's pretty big
working on. Yeah, that became really big. And outside of that, he's also written they've worked on Incognito, which is another. I mean, these are all very similar to each other. The Fade Out is another great book that everyone should check out because it kind of gives a lot of chops to or a lot of props to them going into a period piece. Like, okay, we're going to draw in this decade and that's all we're going to do. This book, Kill or Be Killed, if I were to place this, I don't know, they don't give a year, but I'm going to say it could be in 80s, maybe 90s. Kind of has that old school LA cop, like Lethal Weapon kind of feel too, it's
Sure.
definitely not modern because even the vehicles they're driving are a little older. And, I guess while they do have cell phones, nothing's like super techie.
No,
Like,
I wouldn't say
there's
so.
nothing really.
All right, maybe if you
crazy
went
out of
back
whack.
like 20 years ago,
Yeah.
like early, like late 90s, 2000s, maybe you're getting.
We're going to place this at the year 2000.
Whoa. Stunning conclusions.
We have done it. Sorry, Ed Brubaker. We have decided.
But from what you read, what would you like to see adapted?
I would like to. Yeah, that's where I was going. Right.
Yep.
I would like to see Fatale because I think that was a story that would reach a lot of audiences as far as like the overarching theme and the idea of a strong female lead and the idea of a time spanning story. I think it would hit a lot of levels. And that one I could see being like a great Netflix like
Yeah.
episodic
Sure.
show. I think it would be good.
Cool.
And I think that this is what they're written for. And I really like that they have this passion to write because they tell some great stories. I mean,
Yeah.
there's you'll hardly find a bad
Seems
review
like
for
they
these
always
guys.
have something coming down the
Yeah.
pipeline, like when you think, oh, one book comes out, then it's not even like 3 or 4 months. We're like, oh yeah, here's next book. Oh, a next book and a next book. Hey, why don't you pick up this?
Yeah, and I was reading on this one
Which
too.
they must just work really hard, or all,
I don't know how. I mean, this is an incredible amount of work, and I would be interested to see Sean Phillips like drawing. Like, this is some definite observational drawing. Like he's sitting out on the street corner and just drawing cars drive by and stuff. I mean, he really nails it, and his idea of anatomy and just how people move and frowning faces and smiling faces and stuff. They don't look
a
like
lot of very expressive,
goofy. Yeah,
expressive, yes.
sometimes when you draw people smiling, they just kind of look goofy because every tooth isn't supposed to be
Sure.
drawn and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really is. This would be a good story for people to jump in. I think after you've read maybe some other things by them, just so you can get an idea of like
How Ed Brubaker explains something.
yeah, or like how these guys are handling real world things, because this at first might turn some people off, maybe.
Right. I think prior to this, I only read like this Captain America run.
Yeah.
And that was a great, I think, introduction to say, oh, this is kind of the flavor of Ed Brubaker and John Phillips. And I was like, whoa, this was cool. I wish I got adapted, but it didn't. Because they went, whoop.
The reason why people like that one is because it made those characters like
matter.
really grounded.
Yeah.
Like they were.
Captain America hasn't mattered that.
Trouble.
I mean, he was relevant, but then they made him like super relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of themes that you can play on. And I think that he just really hit on it. Definitely has a great feel for what readers are going to flow with.
Right.
The story, I think, just goes right.
If you like watching crime-based shows, I think this would be a great one to pick out.
Yeah.
Pick it up.
Yeah. If you're a fan of crime noir and all that. And the other cool part is you could pick this up, read 5-6 pages, close it, and something happened in those pages. That's kind of the cool part is, wow, and then it makes you think a little bit. And then you can sit and read 100 pages, and then you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening to this podcast. This is Andrew Launer
and Chris Ramos
signing off.